You ever open your garage door and realize your own house has been hijacked? The smell hit me before the door was even halfway open. Mildew, dust, cheap air freshener trying to cover the scent of old cardboard and rotten fabric. My garage door groaned upward at 5:42 on a Tuesday morning, and the second it cleared 4 feet, a broken wooden cabinet tipped forward and slammed on my driveway hard enough to crack the concrete edge near the drain. I jumped back on instinct, coffee splashing across my work boots while a tower of junk leaned toward me like it was about to collapse. Christmas decorations, rusted folding chairs, 3 ripped patio cushions duct taped together, a treadmill with one wheel missing. Somebody's fake marble lamp shattered near my toolbox with a sharp pop that echoed through the quiet cul-de-sac. For about 3 seconds, I honestly thought I'd walked up to the wrong house. Then I saw the note taped to an old plastic storage bin in thick black marker. Temporary HOA storage. Do not touch. I just stood there in the cold morning air staring at it while the garage motor clicked overhead. Somewhere down the block, a sprinkler system hissed to life. A dog barked twice and went quiet. And standing there in oil-stained jeans with coffee dripping down my hand, I realized HOA President Diane Holloway had finally lost her damn mind. My name's Mason Carter. I'm 42 years old, divorced, and I've spent the last 19 years fixing HVAC systems all over northern Texas. Attics in August. Frozen rooftops in January. I know what burnt wiring smells like before most people even see smoke. And after a 10-hour shift crawling through insulation and replacing compressor units, for people who complain if their house hits 74 degrees for 20 minutes, my garage was the one place that still felt like mine. That garage used to belong to my dad before cancer took him 6 years ago. The old Chevy pickup sitting under the cover in the corner was the last thing we worked on together. Every scratch on those cabinets, every wrench hanging on that pegboard, every oil stain in the concrete floor had a memory attached to it. So seeing somebody's trash piled wall to wall inside that space felt less like a prank and more like somebody walking through my front door wearing muddy boots. I stepped inside carefully, boots crunching over broken plastic ornaments while the humid smell of old fabric clung to the air. And that's when I spotted the HOA inventory stickers. Bright yellow labels slapped across half the junk. Community yard sale, overflow. Storage unit B. Holiday inventory. Diane hadn't just dumped random trash in my garage. She turned it into an unofficial HOA storage facility while I was out working. The woman had actually used her emergency access key to break into my property and claim the space like she owned it. Honestly, I should have been surprised. But this was Diane Holloway we're talking about. The self-appointed queen of Willow Creek Estates. 53 years old. Blonde highlights sharp enough to cut glass. White Lexus SUV, washed every other day. She walked around with a clipboard like she worked for the federal government instead of a suburban HOA with too much free time. Diane had spent the last year targeting me over everything she could think of. Unauthorized garage activity, excessive tool noise, driveway staining. One time she cited me because my trash can sat visible from the sidewalk for 27 minutes after pickup. 27. She actually timed it. The woman treated neighborhood rules like military law and acted personally offended that I still worked with my hands for a living. But this was different. This crossed a line even for her. I reached down and picked up another inventory sheet taped to a cracked coffee table. My garage address was typed across the top beside the words, "Temporary overflow storage approved by HOA administration." Approved by who? Herself? The metallic taste of anger sat heavy in my mouth while I looked around at what used to be my workshop. My father's old socket set buried under somebody's moldy beach chairs. My workbench covered in boxes labeled winter decor. The Chevy barely visible beneath hanging garment bags and artificial wreaths. Then I noticed something else. No locks. No rental paperwork. No insurance tags. No storage agreement. Just abandoned junk stack floor to ceiling inside a private residential garage. And right there, standing in the middle of Diane Holloway's little suburban takeover, with the smell of mildew and motor oil mixing in the air around me, I felt something strange happen. I stopped being angry, because suddenly I had an idea. I spent the next hour moving carefully through the piles without touching more than I had to. The garage felt smaller with every step. Humid, claustrophobic. The old fluorescent light overhead buzzed while dust floated through the beams like smoke. Somewhere underneath a stack of broken bar stools sat my father's rolling tool chest, and seeing it buried under somebody else's junk made my jaw tighten so hard I could feel it in my neck. I pulled my phone out and started documenting everything. Photos first, then video. Slow pans across every inventory sticker, every broken lamp, every warped cardboard box marked HOA seasonal decor. Years working in repair jobs taught me something important. People lie. Paperwork does not. Diane loved paperwork. She practically worshipped it. So if she wanted to play that game, fine. I could play too. Halfway through recording, I heard footsteps outside. Slow, careful. Then my neighbor Frank Miller appeared near the driveway, holding a coffee mug and wearing the same faded Dallas Cowboys shirt he always mowed the lawn in. Frank was retired Air Force, mid-60s, the kind of guy who noticed everything and pretended not to. He looked past me into the garage and let out a low whistle. Well, he muttered, looks like Diane finally found herself a storage unit she did not have to pay for. The morning air smelled like wet grass and fresh mulch from the HOA landscaping crew working near the entrance sign. I leaned against the garage frame and rubbed my forehead. How long has this been here? Frank shifted awkwardly. Started yesterday afternoon. A couple of volunteers showed up with Cheryl Dawson from the HOA office. They had keys. That part irritated me more than anything. Emergency HOA access keys were supposed to be for burst pipes and fire alarms, not suburban garage theft. Frank lowered his voice. Mason, you are not the only one she has been pushing lately. He nodded toward the subdivision entrance where Diane's white Lexus sat parked near the clubhouse. Developer from Austin has been sniffing around this block for months. Bigger homes, modern rebuilds. Your place sits right in the middle of what they want. Suddenly everything clicked together. The citations, the complaints, the constant pressure about appearances. My small one-story ranch house with a detached garage did not fit Diane's perfect little vision anymore. She did not just want control. She wanted me gone. Frank stared into the garage again and shook his head slowly. You gonna call the police? I looked back at the mountain of abandoned furniture and cheap holiday decorations stacked inside my father's workshop. Then I looked at the bright yellow HOA inventory stickers slapped across half the junk like ownership tags at an auction. A slow grin pulled across my face before I could stop it. No, I said quietly. I think I'm going to let the neighborhood handle this one for me. By noon, the Texas heat had turned the inside of my garage into an oven. The air tasted like hot dust and old plastic while sweat rolled down my back under my work shirt. I spent my lunch break sitting on an overturned bucket near the driveway, staring at Diane Holloway's little suburban empire across the street. Her clubhouse volunteers buzzed around with clipboards and folding tables while golf carts crawled through the neighborhood like security patrols. The whole place looked less like a community and more like a homeowners association dictatorship with flower beds. Then my phone buzzed. HOA community email. Subject line: temporary storage cooperation appreciation. I opened it and almost laughed out loud. Diane had actually sent a neighborhood-wide message thanking residents for volunteering personal spaces during our exciting seasonal community reorganization effort. Personal spaces. That was her wording. Like she had borrowed a cup of sugar instead of stuffing my dead father's garage with enough junk to open a thrift store. The email ended with her usual passive-aggressive smile wrapped in corporate language. Residents are reminded that failure to cooperate with approved HOA initiatives may result in future compliance reviews. There it was. The threat underneath the fake politeness. Same trick every time. Smile first. Push second. Punish third. I could practically hear her voice while reading it. Smooth. Condescending. Like every sentence came out preloaded with a citation fee. About an hour later, Diane herself rolled into my driveway in her white Lexus SUV, tires crunching softly over the concrete, while her oversized sunglasses reflected the afternoon sun. She stepped out holding a clipboard against her chest like a sheriff arriving at a crime scene. Even from 10 feet away, I could smell expensive perfume mixing with fresh leather from her SUV interior. "Mason," she said with that syrupy sweet voice she used whenever she wanted something. "I saw your garage was available, so the board authorized temporary overflow usage. Community cooperation is important." I folded my arms and looked past her toward the pile of broken furniture blocking half my workshop. "You broke into my garage." Her smile twitched for half a second. "Emergency access authorization exists for community protection purposes. Storage is not an emergency." She ignored that completely. Diane always ignored facts she did not like. Instead, she tapped her clipboard and looked around my property with the expression of somebody inspecting a condemned building. "Honestly, this arrangement may actually help you long term. Some residents have raised concerns about property appearances on this street." There was again the developer pressure, the subtle suggestion that my home no longer belonged in her perfect little neighborhood brochure. The wind shifted through the open garage, carrying the smell of mildew and rust into the driveway. Diane glanced inside and wrinkled her nose like she was standing near a dumpster. "The board will likely need this storage setup through the weekend," she continued. "Please avoid disturbing any inventory." Then she smiled. Big mistake, because standing there under the buzzing garage light with sweat drying on my neck and her junk filling every inch of my father's workshop, I realized Diane still thought this was her game. She had absolutely no idea what was about to happen to every single thing inside my garage. The second Diane drove away, I walked back into the garage and shut the side door behind me. The air inside felt thick enough to chew. Hot cardboard, mildew, burnt dust from the old fluorescent fixture humming overhead. I stood there for a long moment staring at the piles surrounding my father's workbench while the neighborhood outside carried on like nothing was wrong. Lawn mowers droned in the distance. Somebody's wind chimes rattled softly across the street. And right in the middle of my garage sat an entire HOA fraud operation wrapped in fake politeness and yellow inventory stickers. I pulled one of the labels off a broken shelving unit and turned it over in my hand. Storage Unit B. No barcode. No insurance tracking. No rental contract number. Nothing official at all. Just stickers printed from somebody's home office printer. That was the moment my HVAC brain kicked in. See, repair work teaches you to follow systems. Every bad install leaves a trail. Every shortcut creates heat somewhere down the line. And Diane Holloway? She had built this entire little operation on shortcuts. I started opening boxes. Carefully, quietly. Half the stuff inside looked like leftovers from garage sales going back 20 years. Cracked ceramic pumpkins, tangled Christmas lights, cheap folding signs for HOA bake sales and community beautification fundraisers. But buried underneath all that junk sat brand new patio furniture still wrapped in plastic. Expensive commercial shelving, cases of decorative lighting equipment, thousands of dollars worth of items sitting inside my garage with zero documentation. Then I found the folder. Thin blue binder tucked behind a stack of artificial wreaths near my tool cabinet. The smell of old paper and dust puffed into the air when I opened it. Quiet pence seat. Storage invoices. Equipment rental reimbursements. Diane had been billing the HOA for off-site commercial storage units every single month. $3,800 in seasonal overflow inventory costs. I blinked at the number twice just to make sure I read it correctly. Meanwhile, the actual inventory was sitting in my garage for free. My fingers tightened around the binder. Diane was not just using my property without permission. She was charging the neighborhood for it. Suddenly, her desperation made perfect sense. The developer, the pressure campaign, the endless citations. She needed residents too intimidated to question anything. And people like me, working-class homeowners with old houses and attached memories, we were obstacles. Outside, thunder rumbled low across the Texas sky while evening clouds rolled over the subdivision. The air pressure shifted enough to make the garage door creak softly. I looked around at the mountains of abandoned junk crowding my father's workshop and slowly started smiling. Because technically, none of this belonged here anymore. No signed storage agreement. No rental documentation. No legal occupancy paperwork. Just abandoned items illegally dumped on private residential property. Diane thought she had trapped me under HOA authority. What she had actually done was hand me complete control over everything sitting inside my garage. I grabbed my phone and walked over to the old folding table buried near the back wall. Dust coated the surface thick enough to leave finger trails. Somewhere under the junk pile, my father's old radio suddenly crackled to life from a loose connection, filling the garage with faint classic rock static before dying again. The sound made me laugh under my breath. "All right, Dad," I muttered quietly. "Let's clean this place out." I spent the next hour staging photos. Wide shots first, then individual items. The expensive patio furniture, the shelving units, the holiday bins, the fake marble lamps. I dragged several pieces closer to the driveway where the evening light hit them better. Sweat soaked through my shirt while mosquitoes drifted in through the open garage door. By 8:17 that night, I sat at my workbench staring at my phone screen with Facebook Marketplace open and Craigslist ready beside it. The cursor blinked while thunder rolled closer outside. Then I typed 6 simple words. Free curbside pickup. Everything must go. The first message went live at 8:23 p.m. By 8:31, my phone had already started vibrating nonstop against the workbench. Facebook Marketplace notifications. Craigslist replies. Pickup requests. Questions about furniture dimensions. Somebody wanted the patio chairs. Somebody else asked if the shelving units were solid wood. One guy named Eddie Brooks messaged 3 times in under 2 minutes, asking if the commercial storage racks were still available. I leaned back in my chair, listening to rain begin tapping softly against the garage roof while the smell of hot concrete drifted in from outside. The neighborhood looked peaceful through the open garage door. Porch lights glowing, sprinklers ticking across trimmed lawns. Diane Holloway, probably sitting in her oversized kitchen, believing she still controlled every inch of Willow Creek Estates. Meanwhile, half the city was organizing to empty her fake storage operation overnight. I kept the listing simple. Everything at curb. First come, first serve. No holds. Technically true. By 9:15, the first pickup truck rolled slowly down my street. Old Ford F-150. Rust around the wheel wells. 2 college-age guys inside staring at my driveway like they had found buried treasure. I stepped outside into the humid night air as they climbed out. All this free, one of them asked carefully. Thunder rumbled somewhere west of town while the smell of approaching rain thickened in the air. I shrugged. Everything in the garage has to go. That was all it took. The next 30 minutes felt like a suburban feeding frenzy. The college kids hauled out folding tables first, then patio chairs, then entire stacks of holiday bins. Every time somebody carried another load away, more headlights appeared at the curb. Pickup trucks, small trailers, minivans, a retired scrap collector with a flatbed trailer, 2 women furnishing a flea market booth. One contractor practically sprinted when he spotted the industrial shelving units. The sounds blended together into chaos. Metal scraping concrete, tailgates slamming shut, cardboard tearing, rain beginning to hiss against the driveway in warm summer sheets. And through all of it, my garage slowly started breathing again. Piece by piece, the junk disappeared. Around 10:40, Eddie Brooks finally arrived. Big guy, gray beard, work boots soaked from the rain. The kind of man who looked like he hauled refrigerators for fun. He stepped inside the garage and let out a low whistle. "Buddy," he muttered, running a hand across one of the commercial storage racks. "This stuff costs real money." "Not my problem anymore," I said. He grinned like Christmas came early. 20 minutes later, Eddie and his 2 sons had hauled out almost half the remaining inventory. The deeper the junk piles shrank, the more pieces of my actual garage reappeared underneath. My father's old workbench, the pegboard full of hand tools, the faded red air compressor near the wall. Every time another item vanished into somebody's truck bed, it felt like somebody pulling bricks off my chest. Then came a sound I had been waiting for, a sharp gasp from across the street. I looked up just as Diane Holloway stepped out of her Lexus wearing a cream-colored raincoat over silk pajamas, frozen in the middle of the street under the neighborhood lights. For one beautiful second, She could not process what she was seeing. Residents carrying away HOA inventory by the armful. Furniture disappearing into trailers. Her fake storage empire evaporating in real time under warm Texas rain. Then the screaming started. "What are you people doing?" Her voice cut through the night sharp enough to stop conversations halfway down the block. Several neighbors froze, holding boxes, while Eddie casually kept loading shelving pieces into his trailer without even looking at her. Diane stomped across the wet pavement toward me, rainwater splashing around her expensive shoes. "Mason," she snapped, "this property belongs to the HOA." I folded my arms near the garage entrance while rain dripped steadily off the roof beside me. "Funny," I said calmly, "because according to Texas property law, abandoned items illegally stored on private residential property become the responsibility of the homeowner after unauthorized dumping." Her face went pale underneath the porch lights. That tiny twitch near her I returned. Again, the one she got whenever reality interrupted her power trip. Behind her, another truck pulled away carrying the last stack of holiday decorations. By midnight, my garage was almost empty. By 12:18 a.m., the garage looked like somebody had rolled time backward. The humid smell of mildew and wet cardboard was gone, replaced by motor oil, sawdust, and the faint metallic scent that always clung to my father's old tools. Rainwater dripped steadily from the roof edge outside, while the last pickup truck disappeared down the street, carrying Diane Holloway's fake marble side tables strapped into the bed with orange tie-down cords. Eddie Brooks gave me a grin and tipped 2 fingers from behind the wheel before pulling away into the storm. "Pleasure doing business with you," he called through the rain. Across the street, Diane looked like she had just watched a casino collapse around her. Her raincoat clung to her shoulders, soaked through from pacing in the downpour, while half the neighborhood stood outside pretending not to stare. That was the funny part about suburban neighborhoods. People acted terrified of HOA presidents right up until the second they smelled weakness. Then suddenly everybody became a spectator. Diane stormed toward me again, heels splashing through puddles. Her mascara had started smearing slightly beneath her eyes, though she kept trying to maintain that polished realtor composure. "You cannot just give away association property," she snapped. "I will have the police here within minutes." I leaned against my workbench and wiped rainwater off my forearm with an old rag. "You mean the property you illegally stored inside my garage without permission?" Her jaw tightened hard enough to flex near her temples. "You agreed to cooperate with community needs." I actually laughed at that, out loud. The sound echoed against the now empty garage walls while thunder rolled somewhere farther south. "Diane, you broke into private property using emergency HOA access keys. Then you billed residents for fake storage fees while dumping everything in my garage for free." The second those words landed, several nearby neighbors went completely silent. I saw Frank Miller freeze near his mailbox, holding a coffee mug he probably forgot he even had. Cheryl Dawson stood near the curb, clutching a clipboard against her chest like a life jacket. And Diane? Her entire expression shifted for half a second. Fear. Tiny. Fussed. But real. Then came the sound of another car pulling up. Headlights washed across the wet street before a black SUV stopped beside the curb. Out stepped Mr. Patel from 2 houses down, carrying his phone in one hand and wearing the same confused expression everybody else had. "Diane," he said slowly, "why is there a charge on our HOA statement for a commercial storage unit in Plano?" The rain suddenly felt colder. Diane turned sharply toward him. "This is not the time for financial discussions." Actually, another voice called from a nearby porch. "I would also like to hear that answer." Mrs. Reynolds stood under her awning holding printed HOA statements in one hand. Then another neighbor stepped outside. Then another. It spread through the street like a pressure valve finally snapping open. Questions started flying from every direction. What happened to the inventory? Why are we paying storage fees? Why was HOA property inside Mason's garage? Diane tried to regain control fast. Clipboard clutched tight against her chest. Voice climbing louder with every sentence. The board authorized temporary relocation procedures due to organizational necessity. Nobody bought it anymore. The illusion had cracked. All those years of fake authority suddenly looked exactly like what they were. A middle-aged woman with a clipboard playing dictator over people too exhausted to fight back. Then Cheryl Dawson made the fatal mistake. Standing in the rain beside the curb, she quietly muttered, "I told you this was a bad idea." Diane whipped around so fast her wet hair slapped across her cheek. "Excuse me." Cheryl swallowed hard. "The invoices, Diane. The storage reimbursements. People are asking questions now." That was it. The entire street shifted. You could feel it happen, like air pressure changing before storm breaks. Diane Holloway was no longer the untouchable HOA queen of Willow Creek Estates. She was just a woman, standing in the rain, trying to explain why her community inventory had vanished into 27 different pickup trucks because she illegally turned somebody else's garage into a secret storage scam. And standing there beside my father's restored workshop with warm garage light spilling onto the wet driveway, I realized something beautiful. I had not destroyed Diane Holloway tonight. She did that herself. The rain finally stopped around 1:30 in the morning. Willow Creek Estates sat quiet under wet streetlights while puddles shimmered across the asphalt like broken glass. My garage door stayed open the whole time, partly because the humid air felt good after hours trapped in that mildew smell, and partly because I wanted every single neighbor driving past tomorrow morning to see exactly what was left. Nothing. Diane's fake storage empire had vanished down the highway in the back of half a dozen pickup trucks and utility trailers. I stood near the workbench wiping dust off my father's old socket set when headlights rolled slowly into the driveway again. This time it was not another scavenger. It was Cheryl Dawson. She climbed out of her sedan holding a cardboard file box against her chest, shoulders tense like somebody carrying evidence into a courtroom. The night air smelled clean now. Vet rush. Rain-soaked cedar fencing, fresh motor oil from the Chevy, sitting uncovered for the first time in months. Cheryl stepped carefully around the driveway puddles and glanced inside the garage. "Wow," she muttered softly. "You really cleared everything out. People love free stuff." She gave a nervous little laugh, but it disappeared fast. Diane is losing her mind right now. I leaned against the workbench while Cheryl set the file box down on top of the old air compressor. "What is this?" She hesitated long enough to tell me the answer mattered. "Protection." Then she opened the box. Inside sat stacks of HOA financial records bound with rubber bands. Invoices, expense reports, printed email chains. The smell of wet cardboard drifted upward as she pulled out a thick folder marked storage reimbursements. "She has been doing this for years," Cheryl said quietly. "Not just with you." I flipped through the paperwork while the fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Commercial storage bills, rental invoices, vendor reimbursements, thousands of dollars moving through HOA accounts tied to facilities that either did not exist or were charging double what they should have. Then I saw the signatures. Diane approved every payment herself. She needed residents scared, Cheryl continued. Anybody who pushed back got violations. Fees, threats. Most people just paid because it was easier. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly farther east while neighborhood sprinklers kicked on one by one across the subdivision. Cheryl rubbed her arms against the cool night air. When the developer started talking about rebuilding this section, Diane got worse. She wanted long-time owners gone before property negotiations started. I looked around my garage again. The restored workbench, the pegboard tools, the Chevy under soft overhead light. This place was never just a building to me. It was memory, sweat, family. Diane saw it as square footage. That was the difference between people like us. Cheryl suddenly laughed under her breath and shook her head. "You know what the funniest part is?" "What?" Diane spent years acting like she controlled this neighborhood. But all it took was one Craigslist post to destroy everything. I could not help smiling at that, because she was right. No courtroom, no screaming match, no dramatic revenge plan. Just one entitled woman so addicted to power that she forgot basic common sense. Around 2 in the morning, Cheryl finally headed home, carrying half the paperwork with her. Board meeting tomorrow, she said before getting into her car. Emergency session. Diane going to survive it? Cheryl paused with one hand on the car door. Then she looked back at the now empty garage and gave me a tired smile. Not a chance. After she left, silence settled over the neighborhood again. I walked slowly through the garage one more time, running my hand along the old wooden workbench my father built 20 years ago. The rough surface still carried burn marks from welding projects we worked on together back when I was a teenager. The air no longer smelled like mildew or abandoned junk, just sawdust, oil, and home. Then I reached up and shut off the fluorescent light. And somewhere across the subdivision, I could already hear the sound of Diane Holloway's perfect little kingdom coming apart. The emergency HOA board meeting started at 6 o'clock sharp the next evening, and by 5:30 the clubhouse parking lot already looked like a county fair. Pickup trucks lined both sides of the street. Residents stood in clusters under the fading orange Texas sky, whispering over printed HOA statements and screenshots from neighborhood Facebook posts. Somebody had uploaded cell phone footage of Diane screaming in the rain the night before, and now the entire subdivision had seen it before breakfast. The humid evening air buzzed with cicadas and tension thick enough to taste. I parked near the back beside Frank Miller's truck and sat there for a second listening to the low roar of angry conversation spilling from the clubhouse entrance. Diane had spent years controlling Willow Creek Estates through intimidation and exhaustion. But once people stopped being afraid, the whole thing unraveled fast. The clubhouse smelled like burnt coffee and cheap carpet cleaner when I walked inside. Folding chairs filled every inch of the room. Residents lined the walls holding binders, printed invoices, and phones ready to record everything. Cheryl Dawson sat near the front table, looking like she had not slept in 24 hours. Then Diane entered, and for the first time since I met her, she looked small, still perfectly dressed, still carrying the clipboard. But the confidence was gone. Her smile looked strained around the edges like old tape peeling off cardboard. She stepped to the front and cleared her throat while the room slowly quieted. There appears to have been some confusion regarding temporary community inventory relocation procedures. She began carefully. The room exploded immediately. Confusion? Mr. Patel shot up from his chair holding reimbursement statements in the air. You charged us nearly $4,000 a month for fake storage units. You used private property without permission, another resident yelled. What happened to all the inventory? Diane raised both hands, trying to regain control. The board acted within reasonable administrative authority. No, Cheryl interrupted quietly from the front table. Every head in the room turned toward her. Cheryl opened a thick folder and slid several papers across the table. The board never approved residential storage usage. Diane authorized those reimbursements herself. The silence afterward felt electric. Diane's face drained white under the fluorescent lights. Cheryl, she hissed sharply, that is confidential internal documentation. Not anymore. Cheryl's voice stayed calm, but steady. Residents deserve to know where their money went. Then she dropped the real bomb. There are also discrepancies involving developer communication payments tied to relocation incentives. You could actually hear people inhale around the room. Diane's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Frank leaned toward me and muttered under his breath, "Well, there goes the kingdom." Residents surged forward one after another demanding answers. Printed invoices passed between rows. People compared fees, fine notices, selective violations. Suddenly, everybody realized they had been living under the same pattern for years. Diane targeted whoever stood in the way of her plans. Working-class homeowners, older residents, anybody less likely to fight back legally. And now all of it sat exposed under fluorescent clubhouse lights with 50 witnesses watching her panic in real time. The final blow came from somebody Diane never expected. Mrs. Reynolds, 72 years old, quiet widow who barely spoke at meetings. She stood slowly near the back, holding a yellow legal pad against her chest. "My husband helped build this neighborhood," she said softly. And in 30 years, I have never seen people this afraid of their own HOA. The room went completely still. Mrs. Reynolds looked directly at Diane. You forgot something important. Communities are supposed to protect neighbors, not control them. Diane tried speaking again, but her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. That was it. The illusion shattered completely. 10 minutes later, the board called for an emergency removal vote. Every hand in the room went up except Diane's. Even Cheryl voted yes. Outside, thunder rolled softly over the subdivision while residents spilled into the parking lot buzzing with exhausted relief. Diane exited through the side door, clutching her clipboard against her chest like it could still save her. Nobody followed her this time. Nobody listened. She climbed into her white Lexus alone while warm evening wind carried the sound of laughing neighbors across the lot. And watching her drive away beneath the glow of wet streetlights, I realized something almost funny. Diane Holloway spent years trying to force people out of this neighborhood. In the end, she was the one who no longer belonged there. 3 weeks later, the neighborhood looked different. Not physically. The same trim lawns, same brick mailboxes, same sprinklers hissing across the sidewalks every morning at 6. But the tension was gone. You could feel it the second you drove into Willow Creek Estates. People waved again. Kids rode bikes without parents nervously checking HOA rule sheets taped to refrigerators. Even the air felt lighter somehow, carrying the smell of fresh-cut grass and barbecue smoke instead of constant quiet paranoia. Diane Holloway's house went up for sale the following Friday. Big white sign, planted near the curb like a surrender flag. Rumor said the developer deals collapsed the second financial records started circulating through the neighborhood. Turnout investors do not love buying into active fraud investigations. Funny how fast power disappears once paperwork starts moving in the wrong direction. Cheryl Dawson became interim board president after the emergency vote, though honestly, she looked more exhausted than powerful. The first thing she did was eliminate half the violation categories Diane created. The second thing? She changed the emergency access policy so no HOA officer could ever enter private property without written homeowner approval again. Apparently, my garage became legendary around the subdivision after that. Frank Miller started calling it the Great Texas Yard Sale Massacre, which made me laugh every single time. One afternoon, he even nailed a tiny cardboard sign above my workbench that read Community Storage Unit Closed Permanently. I left it there. The garage itself slowly came back to life piece by piece. I spent weekends cleaning shelves, reorganizing tools, and finally uncovering my father's old Chevy truck completely. The smell inside settled back into something familiar again. Sawdust, grease, motor oil soaked deep into concrete from decades of projects and late-night repairs. Home. One Saturday morning, sunlight spilled through the open garage door, while classic rock crackled softly from the old radio my dad used to keep near the workbench. I stood there tightening bolts on the Chevy's front suspension when Frank wandered over carrying 2 coffees. You know, he said, handing me a cup, most people would have hired a lawyer. I took a sip while warm Texas wine drifted through the neighborhood, carrying the distant sound of lawnmowers. Too expensive. Frank grinned. Instead, you accidentally triggered a community revolution with free internet listings. I looked around the garage for a second. At the workbench, the old socket set, the faded burn marks in the wood from welding projects 20 years ago. Then out toward the quiet street, where neighbors finally looked comfortable in their own homes again. No, I said calmly. Diane did that herself. Because that was the truth. People like Diane Holloway always think power comes from paperwork. From rules. From threats taped to front doors and signatures at the bottom of violation notices. But my father taught me something different inside this garage a long time ago. Real ownership is built slowly. With work. With memory. With respect for the place you stand in. And the funny thing about people who forget that, eventually they push too far. Then one day they wake up and realize the entire neighborhood stopped being afraid of them overnight. I reached up and pulled the garage door shut as evening sunlight stretched across the driveway. The motor hummed softly overhead while the scent of oil and cedar settled into the cooling air around me. Somewhere down the block, kids laughed near the community pool for the first time in months. And behind the closing garage door, my father's workshop finally felt like mine again.